The auditorium doors slammed shut with a sound like a judge's gavel. 16-year-old Jamal Foster looked up from his calculus homework, startled by the interruption. Third period had just started when Principal Victoria Hammond's voice crackled through every classroom speaker. All students report to the main auditorium immediately. Attendance is mandatory. Now 300 students sat in uncomfortable silence while Principal Hammond stood on stage beside a massive whiteboard, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Jamal's mother made in 2 months cleaning houses. Her gray hair was pulled into a tight bun that matched her tight expression. Westbridge Academy, Principal Hammond began, her voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling, prides itself on academic excellence. We are ranked third among Massachusetts private schools. Our graduates attend Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Our students represent the top 1% of intellectual achievement in this country. She paused, letting the words sink in like a knife finding soft tissue. But lately, I've heard concerns. Concerns that our standards are slipping. That accepting students from diverse backgrounds might be diluting the quality of education our paying families expect. If you're watching this story, comment where you're from, and hit subscribe because this gets wild. Jamal felt eyes turn toward him. The only black face in a sea of white and Asian privilege. The scholarship kid from Dorchester who took 3 buses through Boston every morning to attend a school where his classmates arrived in Range Rovers and Tesla SUVs. The one who brought packed lunches because he couldn't afford the $15 sushi the cafeteria served. He kept his eyes down, pretending to study his hands. This wasn't new. The stares. The whispers. The assumption that he'd only gotten in because Westbridge needed diversity statistics to look good on their website. Principal Hammond picked up a piece of chalk, turned to the whiteboard. So today, we're going to test something. We're going to see if Westbridge's reputation for excellence is earned or exaggerated. She began writing. Long, deliberate strokes. Numbers and symbols that made the students around Jamal shift uncomfortably in their seats. X to the 4th power, Principal Hammond announced as she wrote, plus 2x cubed, minus 13x squared, minus 14x, plus 24, equals 0. The equation stretched across the board like a mathematical nightmare. Jamal recognized it immediately as a 4th-degree polynomial. Advanced stuff. Way beyond the AP calculus curriculum they were supposed to be learning. Principal Hammond set down the chalk, brushed white dust from her fingers. From behind the podium, she pulled out a stack of $100 bills, fanned them like a poker player showing a winning hand. $5,000. Cash. Right here, right now, to whoever can solve this equation in under 5 minutes. The auditorium erupted in whispers. $5,000. That was real money. Life-changing money for some. Vacation money for others. For Jamal, it represented 4 months of his mother's salary. The rules are simple, Principal Hammond continued. No calculators. No phones. No computers. Just your brain, this chalk, and 5 minutes on the clock. This is what elite education should produce, students who can think, calculate, and solve complex problems without technology holding their hands. She surveyed the crowd with predatory satisfaction. So. Who wants to try? Silence. 300 students stared at the equation like it was written in a foreign language. Which, for most of them, it might as well have been. Trevor Chen, captain of the math team, sat 3 rows ahead of Jamal. He'd won state competitions 2 years running. Had memorized more formulas than most people learned in college. Trevor studied the equation, lips moving as he worked through possibilities. But his hand stayed down. Sophie Walsh, this year's valedictorian with a perfect 4.0 GPA and early acceptance to Yale, pulled out her phone under her desk. Jamal could see her screen from his angle. She was searching how to solve 4th-degree polynomial on Google. Principal Hammond's smile widened. Nobody. Not one person in this room full of future leaders can solve a polynomial equation. Perhaps I've been too generous with grades. Perhaps some of you aren't as intelligent as your transcripts suggest. Around Jamal, students squirmed. This wasn't just about $5,000 anymore. Principal Hammond was making a point, humiliating them for some purpose Jamal couldn't quite identify. What's wrong? Principal Hammond's voice dripped with false sweetness. Too difficult for Westbridge's finest. Maybe I should have offered 10,000. Or maybe, she paused dramatically. Maybe our standards really have fallen. Jamal stared at the equation. Something tickled the back of his mind. Recognition. He'd seen this before. Not in class. Not in any textbook. But somewhere familiar. Somewhere important. Then it clicked. Notebook 7. Page 43. His grandfather's handwriting, shaky from age but still precise. This exact equation. They'd solved it together on a Tuesday evening 2 years ago, before Alzheimer's stole his grandfather's brilliant mind completely. Before Professor Theodore Foster forgot his own name, forgot MIT, forgot 40 years of teaching mathematics to students who'd gone on to win Nobel Prizes. But Jamal remembered. He remembered everything his grandfather had taught him during those kitchen table sessions that lasted until midnight. The rational root theorem. Synthetic division. Factoring by grouping. Tools that turned impossible equations into manageable pieces. His hands started to rise. Slowly. Hesitantly. Every instinct screamed at him to put it back down. To stay invisible. To avoid the spotlight that would inevitably turn into a target. But $5,000. His mother working 60-hour weeks cleaning other people's houses while her own apartment had a broken heater. His younger sister wearing shoes 2 sizes too small because new ones weren't in the budget. $5,000 could change things. Could ease the pressure. Could give his family breathing room. Jamal's hand went up. The auditorium turned to look. 300 heads swiveled toward the back row where the scholarship kid sat alone. Whispers erupted like wildfire in dry grass. Are you kidding? Him. The diversity kid thinks he can solve it. This should be good. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not cruel exactly, but dismissive. The kind of laughter that said they were watching entertainment, not competition. The kind that assumed the punchline was coming. Principal Hammond's confident expression flickered. For just a second, Jamal saw something else underneath. Surprise. Then something darker. Suspicion. Maybe fear. Mr. Foster. Principal Hammond's voice cut through the laughter like a blade. You believe you can solve this equation? Jamal stood, his legs steadier than his voice. Yes, ma'am. You understand this is a graduate-level problem? This isn't something from your scholarship prep program. This requires advanced mathematical knowledge well beyond high school curriculum. I understand, ma'am. Principal Hammond studied him, her eyes narrowing. Around them, students pulled out phones, ready to record the moment the scholarship kid made a fool of himself. Ready to turn his failure into memes and Instagram stories and proof that people like him didn't belong at places like Westbridge. Very well. Principal Hammond gestured toward the stage. Come show us what you've got, Mr. Foster. Let's see if our diversity admission can back up his confidence with actual competence. Jamal walked down the aisle. Each step felt like miles. Students whispered behind cupped hands. Someone snickered. Another person muttered, "This is gonna be hilarious," just loud enough for him to hear. Cameron Hughes, Jamal's only real friend at Westbridge, white kid from old money who somehow saw past the scholarship label, leaned forward from his seat. You got this, man, he whispered as Jamal passed. Show them. Jamal reached the stage. Climbed the steps. Stood before the whiteboard where the equation loomed like a challenge to everything he was. Principal Hammond handed him the chalk, her fingers cold when they touched his. 5 minutes, she said, starting a timer on her phone held high enough for everyone to see. Starting now. Jamal looked at the equation. X to the fourth power, plus 2x cubed, minus 13x squared, minus 14x, plus 24, equals 0. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. Every equation tells a story, Jamal. Your job is to listen to what it's saying. He pressed chalk to the board and began writing. First, list the possible rational roots using the rational root theorem. Factors of 24 divided by factors of 1. Plus or minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, 24. Test the first option. X equals 2. Substitute it into the equation. 2 to the fourth power, 16. Plus 2 times 2 cubed, 16. Minus 13 times 2 squared, 52. Minus 14 times 2, 28. Plus 24. 16 plus 16 equals 32. Minus 52 equals negative 20. Minus 28 equals negative 48. Plus 24 equals negative 24. Not 0. Try again. The auditorium fell silent. No more laughter. No more whispers. 300 students watching a scholarship kid from Dorchester work through a problem none of them could solve. X equals negative 3. Substitute it. The numbers flowed. The calculations clicked into place like puzzle pieces finding their homes. And then, 0. The equation balanced. That meant x plus 3 was a factor. Jamal used synthetic division to factor out x plus 3. The remaining cubic equation emerged. He tested more roots. Found x equals 2 worked. Factored again. Then x equals 1. Factored again. The final factor, x plus 4. 3 minutes had passed. Jamal stepped back from the board. The complete factorization stared back at him, x plus 3, times x minus 2, times x minus 1, times x plus 4, equals 0. The solutions, Jamal said, his voice carrying across the stunned silence, are x equals negative 3, x equals 2, x equals 1, and x equals negative 4. He turned to Principal Hammond. Where's my $5,000? Principal Hammond stared at the board. Her face had gone pale. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the solution, checking each step. Looking for an error. A mistake. Anything to prove the scholarship kid hadn't just done the impossible. But every step was perfect. Every calculation correct. The solution was flawless. You, Principal Hammond's voice came out strangled. There's no way. You couldn't have. Where did you see this equation before? I didn't see it before. That was technically true. He'd solved it before, but not seen it today until she wrote it. You must have. You must have cheated somehow. Her professional mask slipped, revealing something raw underneath. Nobody solves that equation in 3 minutes without prior knowledge. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Jamal felt the auditorium shift. The laughter had died. The mockery had faded. Now they were watching something else. Something uncomfortable. A principal accusing a student of cheating not because of evidence, but because she couldn't accept that the scholarship kid had succeeded where everyone else had failed. Subscribe now if you want to see what happens next. This is just the beginning. I didn't cheat, Jamal said quietly. I solved it. Just like you challenged us to do. Mr. Foster thinks he's clever, Principal Hammond announced to the crowd, her voice sharp with defensive anger. But I know academic fraud when I see it. There will be an investigation. Until then, you get nothing. She dismissed the assembly with a wave of her hand. Students filed out, confused and whispering. Cameron pushed through the crowd toward Jamal, but Principal Hammond blocked his path. Mr. Foster, my office. Now. As Jamal followed Principal Hammond toward her office, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just triggered something bigger than a math competition. He'd seen her face when she looked at the solution. She wasn't angry because he'd cheated. She was terrified because he'd solved it correctly. Principal Hammond's office smelled like leather and lies. Jamal sat in a chair facing her massive mahogany desk while she paced behind it, her heels clicking against hardwood floors like a clock counting down to something bad. "Explain," she demanded, her voice cold enough to freeze water. "How does a 16-year-old scholarship student solve a graduate-level polynomial equation in 3 minutes without assistance?" Jamal kept his hands folded in his lap, fighting the urge to fidget. "I learned it from my grandfather." "Your grandfather?" Principal Hammond stopped pacing, turned to face him. "And who is your grandfather, Mr. Foster?" "Professor Theodore Foster. He taught mathematics at MIT for 40 years. The color drained from Principal Hammond's face faster than water down a drain. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, she stood frozen. Then she sat down hard in her chair, like her legs had stopped working. "Theodore Foster," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're Theodore Foster's grandson?" "Yes, ma'am." "I see." She opened a drawer, pulled out a bottle of water with shaking hands, took a long drink. "That explains certain things." Jamal leaned forward. "What things?" "Nothing." "Forget I said anything." Principal Hammond's professional mask snapped back into place, but her eyes betrayed her. Fear lived there. Sharp and unmistakable. "When did your grandfather teach you that equation?" 2 years ago. I was 14. We were working through his old notebooks. He kept decades of research problems, teaching materials, things he developed over his career. That equation was in Notebook 7, page 43. We solved it together at his kitchen table on a Tuesday evening. The memory hit Jamal with unexpected force. His grandfather's small apartment in Cambridge, cluttered with books and papers. The kitchen table scarred with coffee rings and mathematical notations scratched into the wood from years of students working problems. The smell of his grandfather's terrible coffee that tasted like motor oil but kept them both awake until midnight. "He used the rational root theorem," Jamal continued, his voice softer now. "Showed me how to test possible solutions systematically. Taught me synthetic division to break the polynomial down into manageable factors. He said," Jamal's throat tightened. "He said that every impossible problem is just a collection of simple problems in disguise. You just have to find the right way to take it apart." Principal Hammond's expression had gone carefully neutral. "Your grandfather is Theodore Foster. The Theodore Foster who published groundbreaking research on polynomial equations in the 1980s. "Yes, ma'am." "And where is Professor Foster now?" The question landed like a punch. Jamal looked down at his hands. "Sunrise Memory Care Facility in Cambridge. He has Alzheimer's. Advanced stage. He was diagnosed 3 years ago, but he'd been showing symptoms for maybe 2 years before that. Forgetting names. Getting confused about dates. One day he called me by my father's name, and my father died when I was 2. "I'm sorry," Principal Hammond said, and for a second, she almost sounded like she meant it. "That must be difficult. He doesn't remember me anymore. Doesn't remember MIT. Doesn't remember 40 years of teaching or the students he mentored or the research papers that made him famous in mathematics circles. Most days, he doesn't even remember his own name." Jamal's voice cracked. "But before he forgot everything, he gave me his notebooks. 17 of them. Filled with problems, solutions, theorems he developed. He made me promise to study them. To carry forward what he taught me. He said, comment where you're watching from if this story is hitting different." Jamal stopped, swallowing hard against the emotion threatening to break through. "He said that knowledge is the only thing that survives death. That as long as someone remembers what you taught them, you never really disappear. He wanted to live forever through mathematics. Through me. Principal Hammond stood abruptly, walked to the window overlooking the campus courtyard where students were returning to class after the assembly. Mr. Foster, I'm going to be direct with you. That equation I put on the board wasn't random. It was specifically chosen to be beyond the capability of high school students. Graduate level. Designed to prove a point. What point? She turned to face him. That Westbridge Academy should eliminate its scholarship program. That accepting students from underperforming districts dilutes our academic standards. I plan to show the school board that even our best students couldn't solve advanced problems, which would justify increasing admissions requirements and eliminating the financial aid program that allowed you to attend. The words hit Jamal like a physical blow. You wanted to kick out scholarship students. Students like me. I wanted to preserve Westbridge's reputation for excellence. Principal Hammond's voice hardened. This school was built on legacy admissions and academic rigor. Opening it to students who can't afford tuition, who come from failing public schools, who don't understand our culture, it changes the character of the institution. So you tried to humiliate everyone publicly to make your case. Anger burned in Jamal's chest, hot and righteous. You put up an impossible equation knowing nobody could solve it. Then you were going to tell the board that standards had fallen. Except you solved it. Principal Hammond crossed her arms. Which creates a rather significant problem for my argument. Good. Jamal stood. Because your argument is racist and classist and everything wrong with education. Students like me don't lower standards. We raise them. We work harder because we have to. We appreciate the opportunity because we know what it's like to have nothing. And we solve problems everyone else gives up on because quitting isn't an option when you're trying to survive. Principal Hammond's expression went cold. Be careful, Mr. Foster. You may have solved one equation, but you're still a scholarship student in a school full of families who donate millions. Your place here is precarious. Don't forget that. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. Your grandfather may have been brilliant once, but he's not here to protect you now. You're alone. And unless you can prove beyond any doubt that you didn't cheat on that equation, I will have you expelled and your scholarship revoked. The investigation starts tomorrow. I suggest you spend tonight gathering evidence of your mathematical knowledge, because I will be examining it with extreme scrutiny. Jamal felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He pulled it out, a text from Cameron, "Get out of there. Something's wrong. Meet me in parking lot." Am I dismissed? Jamal asked. You're dismissed. For now. Jamal left the office, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. She'd admitted it. Admitted trying to eliminate scholarship students. Admitted setting up the entire assembly as a setup to fail. Cameron waited by the lockers, his face pale. Dude, I recorded something. You need to hear this. Recorded what? Principal Hammond's office. I left my phone on the bookshelf yesterday when I dropped off late paperwork. Forgot to grab it until just now. It's been recording on a loop app since last night. Cameron pulled up his phone, pressed play. Principal Hammond's voice emerged from the speaker, slightly muffled but clear enough. Yes, I understand the risks. But if the school board sees that even our best students can't solve advanced problems, they'll approve eliminating the scholarship program. No, I covered my tracks. Nobody will recognize the equation. I changed one number from Foster's original paper. It's been almost 40 years, who's going to remember? Another voice responded. Male. Older. Victoria, if anyone connects that equation to Theodore Foster's 1987 research, you're finished. Academic plagiarism. Using stolen research to manipulate school policy. It's career suicide. Foster has Alzheimer's. He won't remember his own research. And none of the students would recognize a 40-year-old mathematics paper. I'm safe. The recording ended. Subscribe now, this is about to explode. Jamal stared at Cameron. She plagiarized that equation from my grandfather's research. That's why she freaked out when I said his name. That's why she looked terrified when I solved it. Not just plagiarized. Cameron's face was grim. I did some digging during lunch. Your grandfather published a paper in 1987 about fourth-degree polynomial solutions. That exact equation appears on page 12. Principal Hammond published a paper in 2003 about polynomial analysis that uses the same methodology without citing your grandfather. She's been stealing his work for decades. Jamal felt the pieces click into place. The fear in her eyes. The accusation of cheating designed to discredit him before he could make connections. The threat to expel him to keep him quiet. Principal Hammond hadn't been testing Westbridge students. She'd been covering up her own academic fraud. And Jamal had just walked into the middle of it. The school library closed at 6 p.m., but Cameron's family name opened doors that stayed locked for everyone else. His father had donated the entire West Wing 10 years ago, which apparently came with privileges like after-hours access and keys that unlocked restricted archive rooms. Now Jamal sat at a computer terminal in the deserted library, scrolling through MIT's digital research database while Cameron stood guard by the door. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across rows of empty desks. Found it, Jamal said, clicking on a PDF dated April 1987. Novel Approaches to Fourth-Degree Polynomial Factorization by Professor Theodore Foster. The paper loaded. 12 pages of advanced mathematical theory, dense with equations and proofs. And there, on page 12, the exact equation Principal Hammond had written on the board. Word for word. Number for number. Except. Wait. Jamal leaned closer to the screen. The original equation has 25 at the end, not 24. She changed one number. Probably thought that would protect her from plagiarism accusations, Cameron said, looking over his shoulder. Change enough to claim it's different, but keep the structure so it still works. Jamal scrolled down to the author biography at the end. A black-and-white photo showed his grandfather 40 years younger, dark hair not yet gray, eyes sharp with intelligence not yet stolen by disease. Professor Theodore Foster received his doctorate from Princeton University in 1972. He has taught at MIT since 1975, specializing in abstract algebra and polynomial theory. His work has been cited in over 300 peer-reviewed publications. 300 citations. 40 years of teaching. A legacy built on knowledge and rigor. And Principal Hammond had stolen from him. Drop a comment where you're watching from, this gets even crazier. Search her name, Cameron suggested. See what she's published. Jamal typed Victoria Hammond Mathematics into the database. 3 results appeared. A dissertation from 1989 titled Advanced Polynomial Analysis Methods. A 2003 paper about factorization techniques. And a 2015 article about mathematical education standards. He opened the 2003 paper. The abstract made his blood boil. This paper presents innovative approaches to solving fourth-degree polynomial equations through systematic factorization methods. The methodology section read like a copy-paste job from his grandfather's 1987 research. Same terminology. Same step-by-step process. Same theoretical framework. Different examples, but the foundation was identical. She didn't cite him, Jamal said, his voice tight. Not once. She presents his work as her own discovery. Cameron pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. Dude. That 2003 paper is what got her the job at Westbridge. Look. He showed Jamal the school's website, the staff page for Principal Hammond. Hired in 2004 as head of mathematics department based on her groundbreaking research in polynomial theory. Promoted to principal in 2012. Her entire career is built on my grandfather's stolen work, Jamal said. The magnitude of it settled over him like a weight. This wasn't just about a $5,000 challenge or a scholarship program. This was systematic academic fraud spanning decades. We need more proof, Cameron said. The papers prove she plagiarized the research. But we need to prove she knew it was your grandfather's work specifically. That she deliberately stole from him. How do we prove that? Cameron thought for a moment. Your grandfather kept correspondence, right? Letters from students, colleagues, other professors. Yeah. Boxes of it. When he went into the memory care facility, my mom and I moved all his stuff to a storage unit. We couldn't fit it in our apartment, and we couldn't throw it away. Too many memories. We need to check those boxes. If Principal Hammond was ever his student or communicated with him, there might be letters. Emails. Something that proved she had direct access to his research before publication. Jamal checked the time on his phone. 7:30 p.m. The storage unit closed at 8. We can make it if we hurry. They left through the library's back entrance. Cameron's BMW parked in the faculty lot where students weren't supposed to park but where Cameron parked anyway because rules apparently didn't apply to people whose last names were on buildings. The drive to the storage facility took 20 minutes through Boston traffic. Cameron drove like he owned the road, which given his family's wealth, he basically did. Jamal directed him to the industrial area of Dorchester where storage units sat between auto shops and warehouse spaces. Unit 247 was climate-controlled but small, packed floor to ceiling with boxes labeled in his mother's neat handwriting. Books. Notebooks. Teaching materials. Personal papers. Correspondence 1975 to 1990. Correspondence 1991 to 2005. Jamal pulled down the box marked, Correspondence 1985 to 1990. Inside, file folders organized by year. He found 1987, pulled it out. Inside were letters, some typed on actual typewriters, others handwritten. Professional correspondence with other mathematicians. Thank you notes from students. Rejection letters from journals. Acceptance letters from conferences. And then, near the back of the folder, a section marked, Graduate Students. Jamal flipped through. Names he didn't recognize. Letters about thesis proposals and research directions. And then. Hammond, Victoria. His hands shook as he pulled out the folder. 15 letters spanning from 1986 to 1989. The first was a formal letter requesting Professor Foster as her thesis advisor. The handwriting was younger but recognizably the same as the signature on the disciplinary letter sitting in Jamal's backpack right now. Jamal read aloud, Dear Professor Foster, I am writing to request your guidance as my doctoral thesis advisor. Your work on polynomial theory has inspired my own research interests, and I believe your mentorship would be invaluable to my academic development. Cameron pulled out his phone, started photographing every letter. The correspondence showed a mentorship relationship. Professor Foster helping Victoria Hammond with her research. Sharing his unpublished work with her, as advisors did with trusted students. Offering feedback on her draft chapters. Then came the letter from April 1989. Professor Foster's handwriting, strong and clear, Victoria, I am deeply disappointed to discover that your recent submission to the Journal of Advanced Mathematics contains extensive passages from my unpublished research without attribution. This constitutes academic plagiarism. As your advisor, I feel personally betrayed. We need to discuss this immediately. Subscribe, you won't believe what the next letter says. The next letter was Victoria Hammond's response. Handwritten, desperate, Professor Foster, please. It was a mistake. I was overwhelmed with my dissertation deadline and I lost track of which ideas were mine and which came from our discussions. I never meant to claim your work as my own. Please don't report this to the academic board. It would destroy my career before it starts. I'm begging you. And finally, Professor Foster's reply, Victoria, after much consideration, I have decided not to pursue formal charges. You are a talented mathematician who made a serious error in judgment. Consider this your only warning. Do not use my work without proper attribution again. I will be watching your publications closely. She'd been caught. Been forgiven. Been given a second chance. And 20 years later, she'd stolen from him again. Only this time, she'd assumed Alzheimer's meant he'd never remember. Never recognize his own work being used to manipulate school policy and eliminate students like Jamal. She'd assumed wrong. Because even though Professor Foster couldn't remember his own grandson's face anymore, his legacy lived on in the boy who'd inherited his mind and his principles. Jamal looked at Cameron. We have everything we need. She was his student. He trusted her with his research. She plagiarized it once, got caught, got forgiven. Then did it again decades later thinking he'd never know. What do we do with this? Cameron asked. Jamal pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, found the number his mother had saved under emergencies only. The school board met tonight at 7:30. It was 8:15 now. Jamal dialed. Hello, this is Jamal Foster. I need to speak to someone about Principal Hammond. Right now. It's urgent. The Westbridge Academy boardroom had mahogany panels, leather chairs, and portraits of wealthy white men who donated millions over the decades. Jamal didn't belong here. His sneakers squeaked on polished floors. His backpack looked shabby against the expensive briefcases lining the conference table. But Cameron's father had gotten them in. One phone call. One explanation. And now 9 board members sat around the table while Jamal stood at the head with his evidence spread out like ammunition. Principal Hammond sat in the corner, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. She'd been in the middle of presenting her proposal to eliminate the scholarship program when they'd interrupted. Mr. Foster, said Chairman Robert Chin, Trevor's grandfather, old money from Hong Kong with a Boston accent. You have 15 minutes to explain why we should listen to a high school student instead of our principal. Jamal took a breath. Because your principal built her career on stolen research. And she's using it to justify eliminating students like me. The room went silent. Jamal pulled out the first document. His grandfather's 1987 research paper. This is Professor Theodore Foster's original publication on fourth-degree polynomial equations. Published in the Journal of Advanced Mathematics in April 1987. My grandfather, his voice caught but he pushed through. Spent 40 years at MIT. 300 peer-reviewed citations. One of the most respected mathematicians of his generation. He pointed to page 12. This equation appears here. X to the 4th power, plus 2x cubed, minus 13x squared, minus 14x, plus 25, equals 0. Next document. Principal Hammond's challenge from the assembly, written on the whiteboard and photographed by a dozen students. This is what Principal Hammond wrote today. Same equation. Changed the final number from 25 to 24. Otherwise identical. Chairman Chen leaned forward. That's not proof of plagiarism. Similar equations. I'm not finished. Jamal laid out Principal Hammond's 2003 paper. This paper got Principal Hammond hired as head of mathematics. The methodology is copied directly from my grandfather's 1987 research. Same approach. Same terminology. Same theoretical framework. 0 citations of Professor Foster's original work. Comment where you're watching from if you're as angry as I am. Board members passed the papers around, comparing. Whispers rippled through the room. Still not conclusive, said another board member, a woman named Patricia Moore. Parallel research happens. She was his graduate student. Jamal dropped the letters onto the table like cards in a poker game. Victoria Hammond was my grandfather's doctoral advisee from 1986 to 1989. He shared his unpublished research with her. She plagiarized it in 1989. He caught her. Confronted her. She begged him not to report it. He forgave her and gave her a warning. He pulled out Professor Foster's letter, read it aloud. The room went deathly quiet. She stole from him once. Got caught. Got forgiven. Then 20 years later, she stole from him again. This time she thought she was safe because my grandfather has Alzheimer's. She assumed he'd never recognize his own work. Never remember. Never be able to call her out. Principal Hammond stood abruptly. This is absurd. Theodore Foster was my advisor 40 years ago. I learned methodology from him, yes, but that's how education works. Students learn from teachers. Students don't submit their teachers' unpublished work as their own. Jamal's voice cut through her defense like his grandfather's chalk against that board. Students don't build careers on stolen research. And teachers sure as hell don't use plagiarized equations to try to eliminate scholarship students. Cameron stepped forward, held up his phone. I have a recording. Principal Hammond admitting she chose that equation specifically because students couldn't solve it. Admitting she planned to use everyone's failure to justify eliminating the scholarship program. And admitting she changed one number from Foster's original paper thinking nobody would recognize it. He pressed play. Principal Hammond's voice filled the room, crystal clear, nobody will recognize the equation. I changed one number from Foster's original paper. It's been almost 40 years, who's going to remember? The board members' expressions shifted from skeptical to shocked to furious. Chairman Chen stood. Victoria, is this true? Principal Hammond's confident mask crumbled. I can explain. Did you plagiarize Theodore Foster's research? Yes or no? Silence stretched like piano wire about to snap. It was 40 years ago, Principal Hammond finally said, her voice small. One mistake. I was young, desperate to publish. He forgave me. And the 2003 paper? Patricia Moore demanded. The paper that got you hired here? Principal Hammond said nothing. And today's equation? Chairman Chen's voice could cut steel. You deliberately used stolen research to humiliate students and justify eliminating our scholarship program. The scholarship program is lowering our academic standards. A scholarship student just solved an equation none of our paying students could touch. Chairman Chen slammed his hand on the table. Jamal Foster proved that merit isn't about money. It's about ability. And you tried to destroy him for it. Subscribe, this isn't over yet. Cameron's father, William Hughes, tech billionaire and major donor, stood up. I move for Principal Hammond's immediate suspension pending a full investigation into academic fraud. Seconded, said 3 voices simultaneously. All in favor. 9 hands went up. Unanimous. Principal Hammond's face went white. You can't, this is my career. My reputation. Built on lies, Jamal said quietly. Just like you tried to build a case against scholarship students on a lie. The only difference is we have proof. Security was called. Principal Hammond was escorted out, her protests fading down the hallway. Chairman Chen turned to Jamal. Mr. Foster, on behalf of the board, I apologize. For everything. The scholarship program isn't going anywhere. In fact, we'll be expanding it. And you'll receive your $5,000. Plus compensation for the distress this caused. Jamal nodded, suddenly exhausted. But as he left the building, Cameron beside him, one thought burned clear. His grandfather's legacy had just saved his place at Westbridge. And exposed the fraud who tried to bury them both. The story hit the Boston Globe before breakfast. Elite prep school principal suspended for academic fraud spanning decades. By noon, it had gone national. CNN. The New York Times. Educational blogs and Twitter threads dissecting every detail of Victoria Hammond's plagiarism and her plot to eliminate scholarship students. Jamal's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from classmates he'd never spoken to suddenly wanting to be friends. Interview requests from reporters. A voicemail from Harvard's admissions office expressing interest in his remarkable academic integrity. He ignored all of it and took 3 buses to Cambridge. Sunrise Memory Care Facility smelled like disinfectant and the kind of forced cheerfulness that came from underpaid staff trying their best with impossible odds. Jamal signed in at the front desk, received his visitor badge, and walked down hallways lined with residents staring at walls or sleeping in wheelchairs. His grandfather's room was on the 2nd floor, corner unit with a window overlooking a small garden. Theodore Foster sat in his recliner, wearing pajamas at 2 p.m., staring at a television showing a nature documentary he wasn't watching. "Hey, Grandpa," Jamal said softly, pulling up a chair beside him. Professor Foster turned his head slowly. His eyes, once sharp enough to spot errors in complex proofs from across a lecture hall, were clouded with confusion. "Do I know you?" The question hurt every single time. "It's Jamal. Your grandson." Jamal. His grandfather repeated the name like he was testing an unfamiliar word. "I had a grandson named Jamal once, I think. Or maybe that was someone else. I can't remember anymore." Jamal swallowed the lump in his throat. "I brought something to show you." He pulled out his backpack, removed the newspaper with his grandfather's photo from 1987 beside the article about Victoria Hammond's suspension. "This is you. 40 years ago. When you published research on polynomial equations." Professor Foster squinted at the photo. "That man looks like someone important. He was important. He is important. He taught mathematics at MIT. Changed how people think about equations. Mentored hundreds of students who went on to do amazing things. That's nice." His grandfather's attention drifted back to the television. Jamal tried again. "One of your students stole your research. Used it to build her career. But I found the evidence. The letters you kept. The papers you wrote. I used them to expose her. She's been fired. Your work is being recognized again." No response. His grandfather's eyes stayed fixed on the screen where elephants walked across an African plain. "I solved your equation," Jamal continued, his voice breaking. "The one from Notebook 7, page 43. Remember? X to the 4th power, plus 2x cubed, minus 13x squared, minus 14x, plus 24, I changed the final number to solve it. You taught me the rational root theorem. Synthetic division. Everything I needed." Comment where you're watching from if this story is breaking your heart too. Professor Foster turned to look at him, and for just a moment, maybe 3 seconds, maybe less, something cleared in his eyes. Recognition. Not of Jamal's face, but of something deeper. The mathematics. The teaching. The legacy. "Did you factor it correctly?" his grandfather asked, his voice suddenly stronger, more focused. "Yes, sir. X plus 3, times x minus 2, times x minus 1, times x plus 4. That's right. That's exactly right." A smile crossed Professor Foster's weathered face. "You're a good student. What's your name again?" "Jamal. Jamal Foster. Your grandson." The clarity faded like smoke. His grandfather's expression went slack again. "Foster. That was my name once, wasn't it? Before I forgot. It's still your name, Grandpa. And it's my name too. I'm carrying it forward. Carrying everything you taught me." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Foster. Sorry to interrupt, but it's time for your grandfather's medication and afternoon activities. Jamal nodded, stood up. He kissed his grandfather's forehead. I'll come back next week. Bring more problems from your notebooks. Maybe we can solve them together, even if you don't remember me. The mathematics will remember. He left before the tears could fall where his grandfather might see them. Outside, Cameron waited in his BMW, illegally parked in a handicap spot because apparently breaking minor laws was just another Tuesday for wealthy people. How'd it go? Cameron asked as Jamal climbed in. Same as always. He didn't remember me. Had about 5 seconds of clarity when I mentioned the equation, then gone again. Cameron pulled out of the parking lot, navigated toward Dorchester. My dad called. The investigation into Hammond is expanding. Turns out she plagiarized 3 other papers over her career, not just your grandfather's work. She's being stripped of her doctorate. Criminal charges might be filed. Good, Jamal said without satisfaction. Revenge didn't feel as sweet as he'd expected. His grandfather wouldn't benefit from Victoria Hammond's downfall. Alzheimer's had stolen more from him than she ever could. Also, Cameron continued, the board wants to rename the scholarship program after your grandfather. The Theodore Foster Excellence Scholarship. Full ride for students who demonstrate exceptional academic ability regardless of financial background. Your mom would get a stipend too, since you brought the fraud to light. Jamal looked out the window at Boston passing by. My grandfather spent 40 years teaching students who could afford MIT. He was brilliant, respected, successful. But he never thought about kids like me. Kids who couldn't afford elite education. Kids from Dorchester who took 3 buses to have a chance. So what are you saying? I'm saying yes to the scholarship program. But only if it's genuinely accessible. Not just for kids who happen to have genius grandfathers who saved notebooks. For anyone with ability and determination who needs a chance. Cameron smiled. You know what? You're going to change more than your grandfather ever did. He advanced mathematics. You're going to advance justice. They pulled up to Jamal's apartment building. Cracked steps. Peeling paint. A broken streetlight that had been broken for 3 years. Home. His mother waited on the steps, still in her cleaning uniform from her morning shift. When she saw him, she stood and pulled him into a hug that smelled like industrial cleaner and love. My brilliant boy, she whispered. Your grandfather would be so proud. He doesn't remember me, Mom. But he taught you everything anyway. That's what matters. Knowledge outlasts memory. Love outlasts everything. Subscribe, one more chapter to go. Inside their small apartment, Jamal opened notebook 7 to page 43. The equation stared back at him in his grandfather's shaky handwriting. Underneath it, a note he'd never noticed before, for my grandson, if I'm not here to teach him. Remember, mathematics is truth, and truth always survives. Jamal closed the notebook carefully. His grandfather had known. Somehow, even as Alzheimer's was stealing his mind, he'd known he wouldn't always be there. So he'd left truth behind. And truth had just destroyed the woman who tried to bury it. 2 weeks after Principal Hammond's suspension, Westbridge Academy looked exactly the same on the outside. Same brick buildings. Same manicured lawns. Same expensive cars dropping off privileged students. But something fundamental had shifted underneath. The scholarship program applications had tripled. Students from Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, neighborhoods that had never sent kids to Westbridge, were submitting essays and test scores. The waiting list for the Theodore Foster Excellence Scholarship stretched to 200 names. But tonight's emergency board meeting threatened to undo everything. Jamal sat in the hallway outside the board room with Cameron, both of them technically banned from attending. School policy prohibited student attendance at board meetings. But Cameron had his phone recording app running, capturing audio through the thick wooden door. Inside, voices rose in heated argument. "We cannot afford this expansion," someone said. Patricia Moore, from her distinctive sharp tone. "Tripling the scholarship program means tripling our financial aid budget. We're talking millions of dollars. Where does that money come from?" Chairman Chen's response was measured but firm. "We redirect administrative costs." Hammond's salary was $400,000 annually. "The new principal will make half that." "We cut unnecessary programs." "You mean programs wealthy families pay for?" interrupted another voice. Gerald Blackstone, investment banker and father to 2 Westbridge students. "If we cut lacrosse or the Arts Center to fund scholarships, paying families will leave for other schools. We'll lose tuition revenue and gain students who can't afford to contribute." "Those students contribute intellect," Chairman Chen countered. Jamal Foster proved that 2 weeks ago. "One exceptional student doesn't justify this financial risk," Blackstone shot back. "Look, what Hammond did was wrong. Nobody disputes that. But her concerns about academic standards weren't entirely unfounded. Westbridge has a reputation to maintain. Opening admission to students from underperforming districts, students who haven't had access to the same educational resources, will inevitably lower our average test scores, our college placement rates, our ranking among Massachusetts prep schools." Cameron looked at Jamal. "He's trying to kill the expansion." "Multiple board members are," Jamal said quietly. "Hammond got fired, but her ideology didn't die with her career." Inside the room, Patricia Moore spoke again. "I propose a compromise. We maintain the current scholarship program at existing levels. No expansion. We honor the Theodore Foster name with a plaque and a small annual award. But we don't fundamentally alter Westbridge's financial model or demographic makeup." "Seconded," said Blackstone immediately. "This isn't about demographics," Chairman Chen said, frustration clear in his voice. "It's about merit. Talent exists everywhere, regardless of zip code or family income. Westbridge should cultivate that talent." "Westbridge should maintain excellence," Blackstone interrupted. "That's what families pay $60,000 a year for. Excellence. Exclusivity. A guarantee that their children are learning alongside the best and brightest. Start admitting students who can't afford to be here, who don't understand our culture, who drag down classroom standards, and those paying families will go elsewhere." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to collapse the building. "Comment where you're watching from, this isn't over." Cameron stood abruptly. "Screw this. We're not letting them vote without hearing what we have to say. We're not allowed in the meeting. My father sits on that board. And you're the reason this meeting exists." Cameron grabbed Jamal's arm, pulled him toward the door. "Sometimes you have to break rules to change systems." He opened the door without knocking. 9 board members turned to stare. Chairman Chen's expression flickered between surprise and something that might have been relief. "Cameron, Jamal, students aren't permitted," Patricia Moore began. "My father is on this board," Cameron said, walking straight to the table like he owned it. "Which, given the Hughes family donations, he sort of did. That gives me certain privileges. Like the privilege to tell you that you're about to make a massive mistake." William Hughes, Cameron's father, leaned back in his chair with a slight smile. "Let them speak." Chairman Chen nodded. "You have 5 minutes." Jamal stepped forward, his heart hammering. 2 weeks ago he'd stood before this board with evidence of fraud. Tonight he stood before them with nothing but words and the weight of students who didn't have voices in rooms like this. Mr. Blackstone said opening admission to students from underperforming districts would lower Westbridge's standards, Jamal began. "I am a student from an underperforming district. I solved an equation your principal thought would be impossible for any high school student. Where exactly did I lower your standards?" Blackstone's jaw tightened. "You're an exceptional case." "No, I'm not. I'm just a kid who had a grandfather who taught me." There are thousands of kids in Boston who could be exceptional if someone gave them the same opportunity. Kids who are brilliant but stuck in overcrowded schools with outdated textbooks and teachers who are overworked and underpaid. You think talent only exists in families who can afford $60,000 a year in tuition? That's not excellence. That's gatekeeping. Patricia Moore leaned forward. Mr. Foster, we appreciate your passion. But passion doesn't balance budgets. This expansion would cost less than you spend on landscaping, Cameron interrupted, pulling up numbers on his phone. I looked at the budget reports. Westbridge spent $400,000 on grounds maintenance last year. Another $300,000 on athletic facilities that serve maybe 20% of students. The scholarship expansion costs $2 million annually. That's less than you pay for buildings named after wealthy donors who got their names on plaques. Those donations fund operations. Those donations fund exclusivity, Jamal cut in. You're not afraid of losing money. You're afraid of losing status. Afraid that Westbridge won't be special anymore if kids from Dorchester can attend. Afraid that excellence becomes less valuable if it's accessible. He pulled out his phone, opened it to show emails. I've been contacted by 17 students from Boston Public Schools in the past 2 weeks. Kids who saw the news about my grandfather's scholarship. Kids who've been teaching themselves calculus from YouTube because their schools don't offer it. Kids solving physics problems at night after working part-time jobs to help their families. Kids who are hungry for the education you take for granted. Jamal set the phone on the table. Victoria Hammond tried to eliminate scholarship students because she thought we'd lower your standards. You're about to vote for the same thing, just with better PR. Subscribe if you think merit matters more than money. So here's my question, what are Westbridge's standards really measuring? Intelligence? Work ethic? Potential? Or just the ability to afford admission? The room fell silent. William Hughes spoke first. I've been on this board for 12 years. I've donated millions to this school because I believe in education. But Jamal's right. We've been measuring the wrong things. Excellence isn't about exclusivity. It's about identifying talent and nurturing it, regardless of where it comes from. He stood. I move to approve the scholarship expansion as originally proposed. Full funding. 200 students over the next 5 years. And I'll personally donate $1 million to establish an endowment ensuring the program's sustainability. Chairman Chin smiled. Seconded. All in favor. 4 hands went up. Chen, Hughes, and 2 others. Opposed? 5 hands rose. The expansion had failed. By 1 vote. Jamal's heart sank. Then Cameron's father stood again. Actually, I have one more thing to add. If this vote fails, the Hughes family will redirect our annual donations, currently $5 million, to Boston Public Schools instead. I'd rather fund students who want to learn than an institution that wants to gatekeep. The room erupted. Board members shouting. Patricia Moore calling it blackmail. Blackstone demanding procedure. Chairman Chen's gavel came down hard. We'll revote. All in favor of the expansion. This time, 7 hands went up. The Theodore Foster Excellence Scholarship would expand. And Westbridge Academy had just chosen merit over money. 6 months later, Jamal stood in front of a building that hadn't existed when this all started. The Theodore Foster Mathematics Center rose 3 stories on Westbridge Academy's campus, glass and steel reflecting Boston's autumn sky. A bronze plaque beside the entrance bore his grandfather's photo from 1987 and words that made Jamal's chest tight, where genius is nurtured, not gatekept. Inside, 42 scholarship students worked at computer stations, attended tutoring sessions, and studied in collaborative spaces designed for students who needed more than Westbridge's standard resources could provide. Students from Roxbury, Mattapan, Dorchester, Brockton, Kids who took buses for hours to attend classes alongside children of senators and tech billionaires. Kids like him who'd proven that intelligence wasn't bought with tuition checks. Mr. Foster. A voice interrupted his thoughts. A freshman girl, maybe 14, with cornrows and a Westbridge hoodie that still looked new. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm here because of your grandfather's scholarship. Because you fought for it. Jamal smiled. What's your name? Destiny Williams. I'm from Mattapan. My school didn't have calculus or physics. But I taught myself from YouTube and Khan Academy. Applied here thinking I had no chance. Her eyes shone. Now I'm here. Learning. Thriving. Because you made them see us. Keep thriving, Jamal said. That's how we honor the fight. After she left, Cameron appeared beside him. Ready? Yeah. Let's go. They drove to Cambridge in comfortable silence. The memory care facility looked the same as always. Smelled the same. But today felt different. Drop a comment where you're watching from, this ending will stay with you. Professor Theodore Foster sat in his usual chair, staring at the television. Jamal pulled up beside him, opened his backpack. Hey, Grandpa. I brought something to show you. He pulled out that morning's Boston Globe. Front page featured a photo of the Theodore Foster Mathematics Center's opening ceremony. Jamal accepting an award. Students celebrating. That building is named after you, Jamal said softly. Your research. Your legacy. It's teaching kids who never thought they'd have a chance. 42 students this year. 200 projected in 5 years. All because you taught me that knowledge survives everything. Even you forgetting. His grandfather turned slowly. I taught someone. You taught me. Equations. Mathematics. But also something bigger. You taught me that truth is stronger than lies. That merit matters more than money. That one person who refuses to be silent can change systems designed to keep them quiet. Professor Foster's eyes cleared for just a moment. Did you solve the problem? Yes, sir. Every single one. Good. His grandfather's hand found Jamal's, squeezed weakly. That's what I wanted. For the problems to be solved. The moment passed. The clarity faded. But Jamal held on. That evening, Jamal stood at graduation, 2 years early, having completed advanced coursework that Westbridge had created specifically for scholarship students who needed acceleration. Valedictorian. Full scholarship to MIT. Following his grandfather's footsteps, but carving his own path. His speech was short. Excellence isn't about where you come from. It's about where you're going and who you bring with you. 42 scholarship students in the audience stood and applauded. His mother cried in the front row. And somewhere in Cambridge, his grandfather sat in a chair forgetting everything except the one thing that mattered most. He'd taught his grandson that knowledge is immortal. That legacy lives in the students we inspire. That truth always, always survives. Subscribe if this story changed how you see education. Jamal Foster had solved the equation his grandfather had left him. And the answer was simple: excellence belongs to anyone brave enough to reach for it.